Okay, hello and welcome to today's event as part of our MSDynamicsWorld.com webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert and I am glad to be hosting today for this presentation on business process management, or BPM. There's probably never been a greater focus on this topic in the Dynamics AX ecosystem than we see today, and in my view that's the result of an evolution that has progressed over several years and several releases of the product. In watching Dynamics AX and the community evolve, it's clear that both Microsoft, its partners, and AX customers have kept the concept of process-centric technology front and center. We've seen that through core product enhancements that position the company to reach further into the enterprise with AX, and around features like workflow, supply chain management, and role center, just to name a few. We also see the changes with Microsoft's continued effort to bring Dynamics AX more tightly together with other Microsoft technology, like their effort to improve integration with Office and SharePoint. And we see it consistently through AX partners who evangelize the value of designing processes that are both efficient and that can yield useful insights. So with that in mind, today's session is all about BPM and how it can change the way companies approach Dynamics AX. Luciano Cunha is a Vice President at 2Increase, and we are pleased to have him joining us today to talk about value-driven BPM. We also invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today. Luciano will save time at the end of the presentation for that. You can use the Q&A block that you see to the right of the slides in the webcast session here to enter your questions. Without further delay, I am happy to welcome Luciano Cunha. Luciano, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Jason. Happy to be here. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, depending on where you're at. Glad to be speaking to you today. Today I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to start out by just a couple of minutes just to kind of tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're talking about BPM. And then I'll talk about, what is BPM, and then come into a concept of value-driven BPM, which has been around for a long time, but just kind of to set the stage as to how we have experienced how value-driven BPM has really redefined the business application implementations best practices to drive better results. And I do talk about business applications implementations here, but today's focus is going to be centered around Microsoft Dynamics AX implementation more specifically. But the concept and what we're going to talk about today really applies across the enterprise, across multiple business applications, or just as a business as a whole. And after we talk about that, kind of setting the stage, I'll invite a colleague of mine, an expert in BPM, to talk about some of these best practices and how we really have not changed, per se, the list of things that you ought to do while you're going through your implementation or leveraging your ERP, but what you can do differently to be able to drive better success. And then I'll close out with a great success story of a customer that has been able to leverage value-driven BPM to really transform their business and how they are leveraging Dynamics AX in their particular implementation. So who are we and why are we talking about BPM? So we are a Microsoft Dynamics ISV, or a publicly traded company, offices all over the world with over 15 years of experience in developing solutions for Dynamics AX specifically. And more specifically, we build solutions for specific industries and also a plethora of solutions in creating integrations with Microsoft Dynamics AX. But another core of our business is business productivity. And that's where we have an application for business process management inside of AX. But today, I'm not going to talk about our application or how we have solved that within our solution. So it's not a demo presentation. Today, we're really focusing on how do we talk about best practices and do things differently in a way so that we can drive better success to you, both as a partner and as a customer. And we're really bringing in the expertise and experience that we've had from over 1,500 customers within 45 countries throughout the world and working with partners all over the world and really taking how they've really embraced this concept of value-driven BPM and really changing and redefining and how they leverage this process to do their implementations, and how our customers worldwide are really leveraging that to improve both their practices as an implementer or their businesses as a customer. So that's really what we're gonna focus on today. So how is it that applying this value-driven BPM changes how you approach Dynamics AX implementation? As I talked a little bit about earlier, what we're really talking about here is not saying that you're not going to go through the methodology or steps that you're already probably familiar with and you use today. What we're talking about is doing it a little bit differently in a way to be able to help you drive more value from your implementation, mitigate some risks, and really get you to getting a quick return on that investment. So before I go into some of my definitions here, I'd like to start out with a poll to kind of get an idea from you guys out there as to how familiar you are today with BPM. So if you would please respond to the poll questions, I want to get an idea of your expertise out there. So it should show up on your screen on the right side. If you just click through that and submit, that would be great.
All right, some good answers coming in, and we'll close this out in about another 5 seconds here.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So what we're gonna be looking at BPM as a concept that's been around for a long time. So it's nothing that we invented, and also value-driven BPM, not something that we invented. It's something that's been around for a long time, but we're being able to leverage that to redefine Dynamics AX implementations more specifically. How are we doing on the poll? Perfect. Okay, so we have, perfect, Jason, thank you. So I see that quite a bit of you are somewhat familiar with BPM approaches and a few that are very familiar. So let's talk about BPM. So what is BPM? Well, BPM, as we call it, business process management, is just that holistic approach or discipline for covering process-centric technology. So you think about documenting those processes and improving those processes. Some of the predecessors of BPM are lean management, which is really focusing on eliminating waste from within processes, or Six Sigma, which is focusing on measuring the processes to reduce the variation on the operations, or TQM. And then we have APQC, for example, as kind of a standard of reference models of best practices, but also allows you to do benchmarking. So we've got all these types of different variations for assessing BPM, and BPM itself really focusing on the core, which is, for BPM, you take a process, you document it well, you analyze it, and you improve it, but it's all focused around a specific process. And that's where value-driven BPM comes into play. Value-driven BPM is an extension of the current body of BPM knowledge, going into that giving that priority to the strategic business process. So taking strategic objectives of the organization. So taking a step back from that process-centric within one particular process, but taking that step back and taking that higher level view and understanding, hold on, what is first and foremost? What are my business goals? What are my strategies? And how do I drive everything from there? And making that processes and strategy transparent throughout the whole organization, and then being able to measure those processes against those strategies and those company goals to drive true results. So that's where value-driven BPM really comes into play. But we know that implementing ERP in Dynamics AX is a rocky road. We've seen over and over again in the past how, we've all been there. We think that this ERP implementation is going to change our organization, and what we end up seeing is that it becomes this technology-driven implementation. We've seen that way too often, where ERP is almost the end goal instead of focusing on the organization itself. We've seen the inconsistency both from a partner perspective in being able to deliver great consulting services to your customers from all your resources, from the highest qualified resource to the lowest, and having that consistency, but also from the customer, having a consistent approach on those processes, and having that low repeatability has been a big issue we've seen. And we know it takes a lot of time and effort, both from consultants and internal resources, to be able to deliver that ERP implementation. and there is very little reuse of information. And sometimes we see where all of this information is disconnected. You've got different people, consultants, and key stakeholders creating information in all kinds of different silos that's not really connected and integrated in any sense, which makes it also very hard to control, especially as you're doing rollouts into multiple departments and multiple offices or different countries. It can become very hard to control. And when the strategy is not clearly identified and not clearly connected to the processes that then connects to the application, what we've seen is that limited satisfaction. So that's where value-driven BPM helps organizations by, simply speaking, helping you in mitigating that risk and increasing your return, not only throughout the implementation of the ERP, but throughout the whole life cycle in the lifetime of that ERP implementation within your organization, by simply aligning people, processes, and technologies directly to your business strategy and making that business strategy as the first priority. So that's what value-driven BPM as a whole is trying to deliver. So let me tell you a story of a customer that has been able to leverage that approach in being able to implement. In this particular case, it was an upgrade from AX4 to 2012, and by leveraging value-driven BPM, they were able to more quickly identify their requirements and manage their implementation scope. But the key thing here is that Fairfax Metal, they are basically a butcher and distribution company in the UK. They were able to optimize their processes to be able to deliver their goods in less amount of time. Now, they are working with perishable goods. So having less inventory and having that higher turnover of inventory not only mitigates and minimizes their cost, giving them better return, but also increase their customer satisfaction. So they've been able to not only throughout their implementation be able to implement an ERP system that's really differentiated them in the marketplace, but they've been able to continuously improve their processes to deliver more bottom line to their organization. And they've been able to do that by transforming that technology-driven implementation to a more value-driven implementation, where strategic business goals were at top priority throughout the implementation and then post-go-live as they continue to optimize their processes. Very much more process and people-oriented, more efficient. They've been able to centralize all of that information from consultants and people in their offices and key stakeholders all over the world in one centralized repository, but then also be able to realize information so they're not recreating the same thing over and over. Fully integrated in one place where everybody had access to that information. They could roll that out throughout their enterprise. They could leverage that throughout the implementation, but then also post-go-live, be able to have their people trained and leveraging that technology all over the place with that direct alignment to their business, which allowed them and they were able to achieve success. A great case study that it's got a video out there I'd be happy to share with you if you'd like to take a look at it, of a customer that has embraced that value-driven BPM approach, leveraging some of the same methodology for implementing, but looking at it from a different way and implementing it in a different way to really drive value to their business. Sounds easy? Well, maybe I can make it sound very easy, but we all know it's not that easy. And in order to talk a little bit more in depth about how we leverage that value-driven BPM approach in an implementation and how we can differentiate that, I'm going to call a colleague of mine and an expert in BPM. Petrus Nayland is our chief architect, and he's the one that developed our solution and has been working with partners and customers in the world, all around the world, in implementing value-driven BPM approaches. And I'd like for him to share a little bit of his experiences. Yeah?
Peter, I don't believe we're hearing you. Are you there?
I hear him, Jason.
Oh, okay. I do not hear him. I apologize. If anyone in the audience can maybe send a quick chat to let us know if they hear him. Seems to be mixed. Okay. One person says they hear, others are basically saying they don't.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Peter, I think you may want to maybe close out your audio and rejoin. So if you go to the Quick Start tab at the upper left, you should be able to disconnect your audio and reconnect it. That might help.
And yes, as Pieter is dealing with his audio issue there, he's been key as we're working with multiple partner consulting organizations as they're transforming their business to leveraging value-driven BPM throughout the world, as well as, hey, Piet.
Jason,
we can hear you now.
Okay, well, I hope so. Great. Well, sorry about that hiccup. Well, yeah, well, I missed a bit of what Louis is saying, but the point is that we know it's not easy. We've been there. We've spent lots of years with partners and customers in the field, and obviously tried all sorts of things on our own skin. And we know it's not easy to figure out how exactly to document and organize all the in-house knowledge that you have, whether it's on technology or industry level or specific procedures and quality manuals, etc. How we align our day-to-day operations with the strategy, and basically just focusing on the most important problems if we face them. How do we know whether to spend lots of time fixing this in our company or that? How do we know what is most important, and does everybody see it the same way? All of these challenges that Lou also referred to earlier, we basically share them. We've been there, and many companies have, and there is this body of knowledge called value-driven BPM that has kind of evolved over the years. So there's a proven methodology and approach to just tackle these issues. It's all about how can we keep improving our business, like this diagram shows. How can we kind of let our business strategy drive our tactical solution strategy? How can we deliver capabilities in our solution that let the people in the customer organization work according to the company strategy, something that really is in line with what the management team really wants to see. It is obviously an ongoing challenge, but there is hope, because value-driven BPM is something that can help us use all the different tools that we have. We obviously have dealt with this before, and sometimes with great success and maybe sometimes not. But value-driven BPM is an organized kind of methodology or management discipline that uses business processes as the linking pin between business strategy, procedures, technology layers, and all of that. So basically, you kind of speak the same language regardless of which stakeholder you are. You speak the same language, and it makes it easier for people on different ends of our table to communicate and understand each other. So the transparency that Lou referred to earlier is something that is absolutely critical. If we want to make good decisions, we need to have transparency. If we have a limited information, oops. Was that you, Lou?
Yeah, I just moved to a slide on transparency.
Okay, yeah. So I saw it before, so maybe I'm seeing different things than other people in the group. I'm not sure. So what we need is transparency. And with limited information up front in a project, we have to kind of guess quite a few things, and we have to leverage whatever information we have in the best possible manner to create the best solution we can and support the business the best in not just the near future, but also the longer term. And we simply need to use technology to help us manage all these things. We need a centralized repository. We need very structured and organized approaches to handle these things in order to achieve these benefits that value-driven BPM assumes.
And Piet, it's always a balance, right? It's a balancing act, and we were even talking about that last night with a group here close by, where you're always having to negotiate. How much of one side do you need to get versus the other, and there is no real science there, and it depends on the organization and their particular goals to be able to drive that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like this diagram says, you can have it both ways. Either we create a solution that makes it very easy for a customer to achieve very strict compliance with audits and things like that, or we make something that makes it easy for them to be super agile. You can't really have it both ways. can you go to the next slide, please, Lou, just to make sure that everyone is seeing the same? So, and value-driven BPM is, like Luciano was saying in the beginning, it's not just something that has to do with AX or even ERP. It's a discipline that we can use to basically help us deal with all kinds of improvements and initiatives that we have in our company, whether we are an end customer or a partner or an ISV, like to increase, doesn't matter. And ERP implementation is, of course, a great opportunity to try to get some changes into effect and to really support what we are trying to achieve with the new ERP system. But that's not the only possibility. There can be all kinds of opportunities when we're happily running on an ERP system, but we just need maybe some compliance initiative. We just acquired a company. We want to make sure that their processes are aligned with ours, etc. There's all kinds of different reasons why we might want to start a value-driven BPM approach. And we need to build up skills. We need to gather some tools. We need to make sure that we have what it takes to really apply this value-driven BPM discipline. And this diagram there on the right-hand side, these are some statistics gathered by Accenture on why a large group of companies was going for BPM. In that case, and I don't know exactly which industries these companies came from, in that case, most of the companies were trying to improve quality. Some were trying to integrate their departments better. Some were trying to network better with outside, probably vendors and customer organizations. In our experience, compliance, efficiency, and agility, actually almost the opposite, have also been super important to end customers.
And again, Pat, I think that's really dependent on the driver of that organization, right? So we look at that company's strategy goals, strategic goals, and depending on their strategic goals, that's really going to form what their picture is going to look like as they're looking at their processes and then later implementing their application.
Exactly. I mean, it's something that really needs to be used differently in each situation, but the discipline and the approach is the same, and we use this to figure out what is it that the company is really trying to achieve. And obviously those things are quite different from one company to the next, especially one industry to the next. So back to the topic, how does this value-driven BPM impact our implementation practices? I mean, we all know these diagrams here, like Sure Step, probably something that most, if not all of the people on this call have seen, and maybe are applying in projects. Maybe you're on your 50th Sure Step project, maybe this is new to you. But just any implementation methodology, using Sure Step as an example, you can add this layer, or this more advanced layer, shall we say, of value-driven BPM thinking on top of an implementation methodology like this. So, for example, what changes in a Sure Step project is simply, if we go to the next one, please, the transparency that we need to establish. We try to establish that obviously up front. Then we try to use these tools that are a necessary ingredient of value-driven BPM, because remember, with such an ocean of information to manage, you need a very structured repository, a centralized repository to manage all this. So you need to guide your deployment, and most importantly, you need to make sure that whatever you do in the implementation is helping you maximize the lifetime value of the resulting system. It's not just about reaching the end goal of this implementation project. What we're trying to do is we're trying to set the customer up on a successful journey of continuous improvement, where what they've learned in this transparency exercise and what we've supported with our implementation can really be utilized for them to help improve their business for years to come.
And Peter, what we're proposing here is not that you don't leverage Sure Step methodology or any other methodology that's in place, but that we're augmenting that with these value-driven BPM approaches in order to make that methodology even more valuable, both throughout the implementation and post-go live, both for the implementation partner that's in there working with the customers, that they can improve their processes and deliver more value, but then for their customers as well as they're leveraging the application.
I mean, everybody involved. I mean, all the stakeholders, the value-driven BPM kind of X factor is simply that everybody should have a mindset of thinking about business value first. We have this new technology, a great integration or something that we need to make. People too soon jump into detail and say, hey, we can do this and we can do that. That's great. we don't want to do that until after we've talked about, do we really need this, et cetera, et cetera. So we really need to think about value and return on investment and all that. I mean, it's no rocket science. This is just common sense, but it's too easily forgotten in the thick of it, in the middle of a project. And value-driven BPM is just an approach, a discipline that tries to teach us all, everybody in the project, people from the customer side, partner side, everybody, to first make sure that we think about, is this really going to support the company strategy?
Exactly. So
just to try to outline, like, what kind of information are we talking about when we say, establish transparency? I mean, that's kind of a, what does that mean? In order to understand what the business does, we would like to understand, so what are the business goals? What is this company trying to achieve? A retailer would be trying to achieve certain goals. Say a manufacturing company, some other goals, or professional services company, something completely different. We need to understand what this set of business goals that they're trying to achieve. What are the business processes that they have? And you've probably seen APQC, Microsoft Customer Model, a couple of different standard models that can be used. But often you see posters or slides explaining, we are this company, this is what we do. Basically, that's just the business process hierarchy. This is not rocket science. It's just a way to organize and always use the same approach to organize this kind of information and explain what we do. The process layer, understanding how we do all these different things, that's yet another level of detail that we probably also want to have. But here too, remember that can't have it both ways story. In a company that wants to stay agile, you don't need a lot of this. But in a company that must be very compliant to certain regulations, you must have all of these process models laid out in full detail, like you see here. So understanding the organizations, the departments, who's who, understanding the business processes, the business goals that map into different processes, like in this process and that process, we satisfy customer or we build customer satisfaction. In some other process, we save a lot of money and so on. Understanding this and communicating it clearly to our team in the implementation and also to our company employees after implementation is obviously very, very valuable. Now, speaking of the implementation, when we implement, after having gone through this kind of exercise, collected all this information in a structured manner, we can then use that information to basically support our implementation and test activities, whether it's scoping, fit gap analysis, test management. Everything we do in the implementation is something that can always roll up into this business process-oriented framework so that we can more easily see whatever we're doing in the implementation project, how that fits with company strategy, how that connects, what the status is, whatever it is that people are talking about, whether it's boardroom or somewhere in a meeting somewhere, it's always the same frame of reference.
And Piotr,
of information are always roll up into the same business process frame of reference.
Yeah, and Piotr, I think I had a great conversation, I think, with somebody that's even on the presentation today, where, one thing of looking at this value-driven BPM approach as you're going through the implementation is that you're focusing on that business process, in that customer language and what they understand. I was talking to a customer last night, and he was saying how, he had a situation where they would come and they would present multiple options to him, and he didn't even understand the option because it was so technology-driven. And what we're talking about doing here really is changing that approach, not to say that you still need to do your analysis and design, but changing it in a way that you're focusing on, okay, what are my goals and what are the processes for the organization to really deliver those goals, and then eventually tie it to the application, but really having that discussion at the business process level, right?
Exactly, customers first. I mean, it's basically the customer is king kind of principle just in software development. I mean, we want to speak the customer language, whatever people can relate to in that organization. That's what we need to use as the kind of foundation for everything that follows. So, and then once we've implemented a system that then is supposed to support all of those good business goals, if we go to the next one, please, then what remains is to transition that system into the hands of the end users that ultimately will be doing the work and are the real judges of whether we succeeded or not. We need to make absolutely sure that end user adoption is better than ever before. We don't want this fantastic system that we've built to just gather dust and not really benefit the customer organization. So we need to also make sure that all this information that we collected from the very beginning and through the implementation, that it can be used as much as possible to train and guide end users, to get feedback from end users on that information, continue to improve it, and so on. And we need to make sure that we then manage any future change management initiatives, quality initiatives, and so on, always from the same foundation that we built. So this basically is the overall picture here that this business process management cycle is all about. You try to understand and model a company. You then try to build what the company needs or thinks it needs. You then see how it goes, and you support your end users, like we see here in this picture. You guide people within the user interfaces of these applications. You guide them whether they could also be somewhere far and away from ERP, but you still need to guide them somehow. And you also need to make sure that you get feedback from these people, whether these are the workers on the factory floor or ERP people or management people. We need to make sure that we can collect all this feedback and funnel it into something that helps us improve those processes and adjust the company strategy as best we can. And then basically the cycle just repeats. This is not something that just has an end point after we do this. No, this is really an ongoing cycle. And that's kind of the major benefit of this value-driven BPM mentality. It's not about a project. It's an ongoing cycle that we're trying to move a company into.
Yeah, and it's all about trying to achieve those goals, right, Pat? And we've seen organizations that missed that value-driven BPM approach throughout the implementation cycle, but afterwards they realized that, you know what, I need to better align this application, and then they started working through a value-driven BPM approach to get their processes aligned and to understand what they had and then continuously improve from there. It's really a thing that happens, and it's optimization services that never ends, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we know it from ourselves. I mean, who hasn't been, involved in a project at some time or another where, you maybe build the greatest things, but, somehow it just doesn't get used necessarily. I mean, we know also that value-driven BPM, had we known about that 10, 15 years ago, there's all kinds of other things that, we would have seen, benefiting us. But I think this exact approach to first think about the business value instead of technology, and making sure that we're considering the bigger picture and the lasting value for a customer organization. That's what this is really all about. We can still leverage all the same sure-step methodologies and templates and everything. All our business know-how and everything is still perfectly valid and valuable. It's not a total change of anything. It's just a matter of structuring and thinking about what we do in a slightly different way.
Yeah. And I think there is a great, and thanks, Peter, for the information there. I think there is a great customer success story that really showcases how they've leveraged that. Again, we've got a great video case study for this customer talking through the process that they went through. And this particular customer, they're about 780 employees in Denmark and Greenland. And what they ended up having to do is they went through a regular implementation of Dynamics AX 2009. They really felt the pain, though, and I can really see how they've leveraged the ERP implementation, like I talked about originally, in a way that it was very functional, feature-focused. They had that technical conversation, and it seemed like for them that the end goal was the implementation of that ERP. And they couldn't leverage the ERP to really help them optimize their processes to save and really deliver value to that bottom line, to the net of their business. So when they went over to an upgrade, they decided, you know what, this approach with this particular methodology is okay, but I need a different approach that's actually going to put my strategy, my people, my processes at the center of everything. And they really did. And before they went through that upgrade, they started the process of really going in and really buying into that value-driven BPM approach. And they started defining their strategy and then going down into defining their org structure and their processes and really focused on that to later connect to the application. And they're kind of in a unique scenario where they basically have all of the transporting of goods from Greenland. They have the the control over that. But one of the key pieces for them here is that they need to be able to optimize their prices. It's not like their market is growing. It's not. And they needed to be able to not instead of growing their market share, because they already have 100% of the market share, with the costs increasing in fuel and all kinds of things, metals or whatever, they needed to be able to optimize their processes. And they did that by leveraging, again, that value business BPM approach to having this continuous optimization of their ERP implementation to drive true value back to the organization. So they've got cross-functional teams that organization-wide is looking at and communicating and collaborating on these processes. They're able to then leverage those process changes and implementations into the ERP system to be able to save more money in their particular different efficiencies that they've found and be able to drive true value to the organization, becoming more profitable as an organization. So again, great customer story that leverage first the generic, I have just a sure-step methodology, and they became very product-centric there. And then when they went to the 2012 implementation, they were able to deliver, one, mitigation of risk through their implementation, but two, better returns, quicker returns on the investment that they had on Dynamics AX. This is a great customer story. So we really talked about how, building that focus on strategy. So starting with modeling your business and how you're going to start with the strategy level and then the organizational structure that's going to execute that strategy, and then going down to that process hierarchies. And then modeling your entire business and all your processes and having that language for your business. So as a VAR, as an implementation consultant organization, you're able to then come in and help your customers in talking their language and making sure that you're keeping center focused that strategy and modeling their business with them so that they understand where they are today and where they're going to be. And then finally going down to the level of the application by connecting down to ERP. And as we go into the implementation, leveraging that value-driven BPM to help you reduce risk, mitigate your implementation risk, but at the same time, helping you in managing scope and your milestones throughout that process. But then post-go live, helping your business users actually learn how to leverage the application and better adopt it, which we've seen that's directly related to being able to gain returns from the application. And then continuously interact with peers, both within the organization and outside of the organization, to evolve and improve those processes to gain some of those efficiencies, like we've seen from some of those customer examples like Royal Arctic earlier today. And then continuously monitoring and improving that by looking at benchmarks and measuring your processes and how they're fitting with your strategic goals to see how well you're doing in getting the return from your applications and your investment. So that's kind of at a high level what we wanted to share today. Obviously, we can spend days on this particular topic, and we'd be happy to help you with any questions that you have. My contact and Pierre's contact is on there, and we'd like at this point to open that with questions. And if you're interested in looking, and as I said, this is not a presentation that's specific about our product. If you want to see specifically how we have been able to help organizations in driving both partners and customers drive through that process through our product, we'd be happy to show you a demo of that. But if you have any questions in a general sense as well, we'll be happy to answer you that as well. Do we have any questions?
Okay, let me remind folks you can use the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the screen. I know several people have used it already. We do have a couple of questions that have come in already, Lou.
Okay.
The first one, actually, it's more of a bit of a comment, but Julian says he finds that the BPM module of AX itself is lacking features, and he's actually taken his own approach to rendering business processes in Visio. Is that something you see frequently?
Absolutely. We understand that, I think he's talking about lifecycle services there, which is a great set of technical tools to help you through the implementation process. and you should definitely leverage that technical capability. When it comes to the process modeling side of that tool, it's not a true BPM approach in there, and you don't have the value-driven BPM capabilities that you would in our application, for example. So in that case, our customers and partners leverage our tool, which is called Rapid Value, to be able to do that, which incorporates this value-driven BPM concept as part of that. And it is true, you've got to be able to have some tools to help you in not only managing that information, but also centralizing, communicating, and exchanging information there. So you're right, existing tools for Microsoft Dynamics isn't quite there, but there are other tools in the marketplace, including ours, that are able to do that. And ours specifically is built for Microsoft Dynamics AX.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here: how does value-driven BPM process manage situations where the system needs customization to align with their desired process?
That's a great question, Jason. And I think that the key here is, again, to look at the strategic goals of the organization.
Yeah. Can I take a stab at this?
Yeah.
Because I think this also relates to another question about whether there's a specific example of where this value that we talk about has helped prioritize things. In both cases, what you need to try to get is an understanding, or the premise is that you have some kind of understanding of what business goals we're talking about. So for both of these questions, first of all, we need to get some kind of transparency and clarity on the business goals that the company has. Second, and this is all back to what we said earlier in the slides, we need to get this transparency before we can make these good decisions, right? So let's say that we know a simple list of business goals, and then let's also say that we have a pretty good overview of the business processes that the company is performing. In actually both of these questions, imagine that this customization is something that has to do with, say, something about service in one hand, and maybe something about, I don't know, finance or something in another part of the company. What you need to do is you need to kind of, before you go into customizations or before you decide, hey, let's do these requirements, there may be equal effort, so to speak, but one requirement has to do with this business process and another one has to do with something completely different. The prioritization question here, and I guess the same question is behind this customization question, which one do we do? When do we customize and when not? If a business process is clearly linked to some key business goals, and we see that this business process is crucial to the successful operation of the company, then clearly we should consider customizing and optimizing it as best we can. If, however, this business process is not maybe something that's really critical, then either we need to review that. Do we actually think that this is a critical process after all? And if so, maybe we customize. But if not, we should definitely consider not customizing anything there and just going with a standard solution. So I think that I hope that this answers both questions there, because it's really about how can you relate certain functional or process-related requirements or even technically oriented requirements in a certain area of the company. How can you relate that back to business strategy and business value? And you can do that only by having a fairly elaborate centralized database that allows you to connect these dots, functional requirements or technical ones, to a certain part of your business process hierarchy, and then all the way up to a certain part of your business strategy. And this is the only way you can easily see this. But a couple of simple steps allow you to do this fairly efficiently. Does that answer your question?
Well, I certainly invite the person who asked to chime back in if they had any follow-ups. We have a couple of people asking if you can discuss the differences in approach between what you're discussing here and Microsoft's lifecycle services.
Sure.
So, and I invite, and I'll let you answer here in a second, Pat. But I'll invite you guys if you'd like more information about our product, and we've got a white paper that actually talks to that exact question. Just go to axbpm.com, and you should be able to gather some more information there as well. But Pat, you can address the question.
Sure. Yeah, and so can you. So, but the question is, well, the obvious question that many people might have is like, hey, I can see diagrams in this one and I can see diagrams in that one. Are these like the same type of product? And that's where it really begins and ends, because these are not the same. Lifecycle Services is an extension of the AX Application Lifecycle Management Suite, and has introduced all sorts of great things like the diagnostics and all of those good tools that you guys probably know about in LCS, including the process-oriented way of describing how you do certain things inside AX. But the focus and the scope of LCS is very much around AX. I mean, as the name implies, and also how you need to log in specifically to and create a kind of a development team access for that. So it's not really intended to take this holistic approach and focus on end-to-end business and involve management teams and end users and things like that. Our take on this is use both. These are both great tools, created for different purposes. LCS is much more likely to be used by the implementation team and the IT people and administrators and those guys, both during implementation and probably also through the lifetime of your solution. Whereas our product is likely to be used by many more stakeholders, and the viewpoint is, it's basically taking a few more steps back, looking at the big picture, both in time and in scope of the business. The end-to-end company is under scrutiny there.
Yeah, and then another angle of that, Pieter, is that the business modeler as part of LCS is just one of the small pieces of that technical tool bench, is to really helping organizations within AX. Yeah, and our tool was built in a broader sense. It's a value-driven BPM tool to help organizations from top down, starting at the strategic level, throughout multiple business applications, throughout the entire enterprise, whether you have somebody leveraging the business application or not. We even have a new tool that we're releasing here at the end of this month. It's not out yet, so don't go out and start telling everybody, because we haven't released it yet, but you're going to see at the end of this month. We've got an HTML5 based application that has social BPM components to that. And for users that are not AX users, they can see their own standard operating procedures. They can interact with that. I was talking the other night with a group as well, how as part of this approach of having social connected with the data and having that information available to your employees, partners, and customers, is that now, in this particular example, the security guard was the one that was creating ideas that turned into the largest number of innovations that organization ended up realizing. So we've got a full end-to-end value business BPM concept from the get-go that's leveraging, that's being leveraged through the implementation, helping multiple companies roll out multi-language, and helping all the way through post-implementation, through monitoring and leveraging that system for the life cycle of the system.
Yeah, and I think it's important to just keep in mind that this value-driven BPM approach, so rapid value, because that supports that, is all about the company. That's the starting point. So, and that obviously includes lots of people that will never see AX in their daily job, probably. So, for example, if you think about that everything is role-based, we're taking a role-based approach, and value-driven BPM very much supports that practice. We do the same. Only our roles, they could be any role. I mean, many of them might match some security roles in AX, and if you model a certain customer, then many of the roles that you might have in your diagrams might match some security roles in AX. So you can do that and analyze, for example, do I have everything set up to allow this? What's the license impact? That kind of thing. But there's also plenty of other roles that are just happening somewhere or just busy out in the field somewhere. And those guys also need guidelines. They also need step-by-step instructions. They also need a way to channel their feedback in order to improve processes and so on. And that's what I think also highlights the difference in approach and scope between the two. But again, use both. That's our stance on this.
Yeah, and we've seen, kind of to continue that a little bit with an example, we've seen partner of ours create content. I mean, we're delivering the tool, our tool specifically, with lots of great content already, right? So we have over 1,600 activities over 2,800 activities already pre-mapped, 70 KPIs already pre-mapped, lots of processes. I think 13 different industries, correct me if I'm wrong, Piotr, that's already, we've got templates inside of the solution there, but we've got partners throughout the world that's leveraging the tool and adding even more industry content in there to be able to catch, again, not just AX, but the entire specific industries within the application.
All right, we have several other good questions coming in here. One thing that's come up several times, people asking how they can get access to the slides, and I'll just mention that we are going to make a copy of the slides and the recording available, and we will send everyone who registered for the event an update when that is available. Lou, so we have another question here. Can you give a specific example of where the value driver helped prioritize things?
Yeah, I was trying to address that one in my answer to the question about where to customize and when to customize and when not. And the answer here is the same, that if you understand the business strategy in terms of business goals that can be mapped out to a business process hierarchy that covers the end-to-end business, describing everything that goes on in the business, then whatever customization or requirements you might be dealing with, in the end, it will surface somewhere in this business process hierarchy. Either this has to do with improving, say, sales-related some things, or manufacturing, or whatever. You can find a place for this somewhere within this business process hierarchy, by definition. And then by doing that, the relation between that particular business process and the business strategy that we have set up front, that is going to guide us in prioritizing these different requirements. Basically, you have traceability all the way from your business strategy down to your business processes and all the way down to applications. So any requirements, whether they are process change requirements, technical ones, functional ones, you usually can hook them into this network of information and figure out which requirements are going to give me more return on investment than others.
Yeah, and if I can get very tactical there to answer that question, I mean, we have the definition of the business goals defined in the system, connected to specific processes, which is where we also keep track of gaps and fit within the application. But we can document the gaps within the application, and then you have that direct tie from that business goals to the processes, which has a gap and a definition of a gap. And then you can start the prioritization. And by the way, beyond that, you can have KPIs and understanding how well that process is performing. And by linking those and making it visible and available in the application, it helps you then make that decision. Okay, is this core to my business or not? Do I change my company processes to just meet the standard because it's not a strategic differentiator? Or do I go in and customize? Or do I go in and look for a standard industry solution to put in place here?
One question. I'm sorry, was there?
No.
Move on to the next question. Okay. Someone asks, how does the two-increase solution combine BPMN and standard AX workflows that are not in BPMN?
So let me address that. So we actually, if I get again very tactical, we've embedded Visio as part of our application, and we modified it so it understands AX. But and it's to help us model some of that data. But the tool itself, though built inside of AX, is meant as a full value-driven BPM tool, which means that by definition, we're able to model processes inside of AX, and in there, we can leverage the modified embedded Visio that we have to be able to, get very deep in the data model inside of AX, or outside of AX. So we have customers that are leveraging the functionality and partners that have created content to manage their PLM system, for example. And all of their processes for PLM is inside of our application and tied to the PLM application instead of tied to AX. Our tool is generic in a way that and it's very visible. You can see processes mixed in one flow where I have manual processes, PLM processes, or payroll processes combined in with AX processes. It's just a natural thing within the application. Petra, anything to add there?
No, I think, yeah, at the risk of, distracting us from the topic of this one. I mean, of course, we'd be happy to tell people more about this if you like in a follow-up call. But I think you described it very eloquently there.
Yeah.
All right. Prakash actually raises an interesting question. There was a poll earlier in the presentation asking how familiar people are with BPM, and he asks, would you please suggest any training in BPM to help his organization use the VBPM approach?
So I will. I'll let Piotr talk about some. There are lots of great guidance there in the BPM body of knowledge and others, and Piotr can help us in adding more to that as an expert. But we also have been working closely with partner organizations in helping them leverage value-driven BPM in a better approach. So we have some of our own training that we've worked with our partners to be able to better leverage that application to standardize their implementation approaches and therefore increase the value of what they do for their customers. So that's as well. And we've seen even partners that are leveraging the tool itself to help train other people within their own organization and their customers in that value-driven BPM approach. Piotr, any specific areas and tips of training resources that?
I think if you Google this, I mean, or sorry, Bing, I guess in this crowd, you have thousands of training offerings, and depending on your geography and specific needs, I think it's too difficult to suggest some one resource over the other. But exactly like Lou was saying, the partner channel, probably some of the people on this call, I haven't had time to look at each one, but probably some of the people on this call and many partners that we know of in the business, they are starting to build up, not on top of their application expertise that they have, for example, on AX or other applications. They're starting to build up this business process management expertise as well, and have done really well in that journey. And then, of course, you also have these kind of pure play BPM training camps, which are totally useful as well, because, for example, our tool uses a certain notation called BPMN, which is just an industry standard notation, and anybody can follow training. You can buy books, you can even just follow some really great tutorials on the internet. If you just look at the BPMN tutorial, you will find an immense list of all kinds of very useful information and slide decks and whatnot, including some service offerings around that. So,
and Piotr, what we can do is we can follow up after the webinar. We can also follow up with you guys with a couple of different sources of more general value-driven BPM approaches that you could leverage as you're growing in that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew asks, how long does it typically take to build out the initial framework, acknowledging that he knows it will vary based on client size and complications, but is there any rough rule of thumb that you can offer, and would you advise starting this way before an actual implementation?
Brilliant question. Remember that slide deck that slide with you can't have it both ways. So is this for an agile situation or a compliance intensive situation? The answer is going to vary, with a couple of magnitudes, depending on which way you want to go. Enterprise, okay, and even then, the scale and the company culture, and again, it all goes back to your business goals and how you want to operate as a company. Do you want to have everything laid out down to the last detail, or do you just want to kind of lay out the core processes in detail, and the rest is, I mean, you trust your people, they know what they're doing, kind of, if that's the air of the discussion in your company, then, that can have a huge difference in the effort that you need. Our mantra, for example, with this tool is, less is more, always. I mean, no one has time. At least you don't have enough time, for sure. And the less is more mantra is something that I really believe in. We built the whole tool around this. And we've seen partners apply the same when they create, for example, templates for certain industries. We've also seen customers follow the same approach. And So there's really, it's really difficult to answer this, but I think also if we could follow up and understand a little better what you would like to achieve, then I'm sure we could come up with some kind of suggestion. But if we talk about what's the bare minimum, in order to start to benefit from value-driven BPM, I think that's maybe an interesting question as well. What's the bare minimum? If you have a slide deck or if you have a poster on the wall somewhere that says, here's everything we do, then you can map out your business process hierarchy, at least at a rough sketch. If you can, on top of that, also explain what your company strategy is in terms of your business goals, and you take the time to map these things against one another, so you understand which business goals are being impacted or driven by a certain business process. You actually don't need a whole lot of detailed modeling to start to benefit from value-driven BPM, because already after this exercise, you can start to do all this prioritization that we talked about earlier with a couple of questions that were raised earlier, because now finally you understand, well, okay, I may not have the detailed diagram for this yet, but I know that these requirements are in this part of my business, and I know that this one is super important, and the other one that we talked about this morning is not, so let's focus on this. So basically, you don't need a whole lot of time to get to an operational level with value-driven BPM. It does not mean that you have to fully specify everything you do in glorious detail in these BPMN diagrams, not at all.
Yeah, and let me address the other side of that question, which is, should I start early or before I even start the implementation? Let me give you just a couple of examples. One from our partners that are leveraging this tool. We have partners that have built some content for specific industries on top of the tool, leveraging the tool, and they start leveraging that content from the pre-sales engagement. Before they even start engaging with that customer, they already start leveraging the tool to start identifying what is in scope, what's out of scope, what are the high-level areas where we see some gaps and areas that we do not. Other partners are leveraging some of our standard industry content that we have there. We have, as we said, 13 different industry templates already in there, and they start leveraging that way before the customer even acquired it. Why? Because in there they start that centralized repository for information that starts guiding that entire process with that strategy at the very top, and then through the implementation they continue to do that. There is a lot of repeatability there if you're continuously just looking at that from early on. Let me give you an example from a customer perspective. We've got customers in 2009 that are looking to upgrade to 2012. Our tool, though built in 2012, will connect up to the processes in 2009. So we've seen customers doing their as-is scenarios and documentation of their processes in 2009, and then importing it into the tool into 2012, and then doing their to-be validation in 2012. A lot of times leveraging our 2,800 activities already predefined that tells you basically what steps you should do to perform certain activities. So do I believe it needs to be done earlier? I think it's critical that you start this as early as you possibly can, because then you start with that right framework in mind, starting with your business goals, driving down to your processes, and then eventually getting to the application.
Okay, do you have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely.
A couple more come in. Okay.
Absolutely.
So a question about process KPIs that you mentioned. Are there any integration or automation capabilities in the solution to actually determine those KPI values for the defined custom processes based on AX data?
Yeah. Okay, so So rapid value. So our tool is more about describing achieving this transparency, and then using that to lead both the implementation and also the ongoing operation of the system. So it knows about. So think of it this way: it knows about the KPIs, it knows about how they relate to goals and processes and things like that. But in the current version, it does not actually collect the KPI values. That is definitely something that's on our roadmap, but it's not a feature today, to be honest. Does that answer the question? Maybe to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And if the person who asked it would like to, oh, he said thanks. I think he did. Yes. Okay. A question.
But Jason, just to follow up on that real quick. So what Petra means there is, like, for example, we've got, I don't remember the right number, there are about 80 out-of-the-box KPIs within AX. We have those defined and tied into to the strategy. So we have strategic goals tied to processes, tied to these KPIs and all the definition as to what it is. And those KPIs, the data is collected in the standard KPIs that are in standard AX. So it's not like there is no measurement of that. It is being measured. It's tied to the KPIs, but it's the setup and the parameterization of that KPIs is actually in AX. Yeah. We have that definition within the rapid value connected all the way up.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, thank you. So no you think of it as a kind of a blueprint. You know, it's your BI tools, they already collect this. What rapid value helps you do is just understand. So what do your BI tools tell you? You know, what can they tell you? Like, for example, you know, we had fun creating this library of AX activities and the building blocks that Lou was referring to earlier, including KPIs. Like, does anyone know exactly all of the KPIs that standard AX has to offer? It's a great set of KPIs, but it's difficult sometimes to understand, you know, which ones would you use and when would you use them to track which goals and so on. So rapid value helps you do all that and gain this transparency and visibility into what you have maybe already at your disposal in your BI systems today.
Sorry, Jason, you had another question?
Yeah, someone asked a few minutes ago how to use rapid value and the PFC framework implementation with lifecycle services, I think specifically related to AX 2012 R3.
I'm not sure what PFC stands for. Yeah, professional services, or no, that's not it.
So, yeah, so that was from Julian, and if you're still on the line, feel free to clarify on that. But let's move on. There were a couple of other questions. So someone asked about...
Oh, you're talking about PCF, the process classification framework from APQC, Julian?
It was the process framework, yeah.
Yeah, I see. Okay, yeah. So, the process classification framework from APQC, as you know, that's an open standard, basically. And Microsoft has chosen to start their content according to that structure, which, as you know, is a pretty big structure. It's kind of one size fits all. That's the goal with APQC and the cross-industry framework there. And then it's very generic, and you have basically a place to put whatever process information you have. Remember, like we said, the process hierarchy is describing what you do in a company, and APQC is just a standard way to kind of create that structure, so that my company, your company, his company, they would all, you could all describe them in the same way using APQC. Now, LCS has started to add a couple of detailed diagrams for how you would do certain things in AX, and those kind of roll up into certain points within the APQC hierarchy. Rapid value as well. I mean, it's not limited to APQC at all, so you can use APQC or, like I said, the customer model or score or whatever, or some in-house process structure that maybe has been used over the years with good success. But if you use APQC, you can also do the same with rapid value. Or then even using the LCS, you know, the recorder tool in LCS, you can even, you know, use the same to kind of just add flows that are maybe non-AX flows, like Lou and I were talking about earlier, flows that may relate to the LCS content, and it all kind of just rolls up into the same LCS, APQC process hierarchy. And so I don't know whether this answers the question, probably not, but think of it as rapid value is kind of like a superset of processes, because there are more flows than just AX flows involved in rapid value. You know, we kind of are a little bit further away from AX than LCS is. But if you use APQC, the good news is that anything that you have in LCS that maps into APQC somehow, you have a very clear mapping on where to place those kinds of flows also in rapid value.
Yeah, and just to clarify there, Microsoft and APQC, they're leveraging APQC in a couple of different industries, so retail, professional services. That's their focus. We have all of the APQC libraries already in rapid value available to you. And though we are more generic and we can document anything and everything outside of AX, other applications and inside of AX, when it comes to inside of AX, we can do you know, just the same, leveraging the same tools in collecting the deep data that is available through LCS. We can collect that same sort of data. Plus, we've already documented, as I said earlier, 2,800 activities already out of the box, and all the KPIs already out of the box. that's in the application already.
Yeah. Does that somewhat
another question, what is the need for embedding Visio if it is not doing the right validation for BPMN 2.0?
So let me see if I understand the question. So typically you see Visio diagrams, you see lots of Visio diagrams in a customer situation. Let's say there's a customer, they want to go with AX2012, they want to apply value-driven BPM. Usually you have a number of flow diagrams, whether they already existed as part of the quality manual or whether they were made specifically as part of maybe some requirements specification process just for an implementation. You usually have a number of Visio diagrams. In our experience, usually those Visio diagrams are, even though they're created with BPMN, because Visio is not a BPM tool, it's not it doesn't normalize data, it doesn't validate all kinds of references and relations the same way that the database really does, then quite often you have to take those Visio diagrams and see them as input, and very valuable input of that, because there's lots of thought and discussion that has gone into designing those flows exactly that way. But then what follows is that you would have to kind of resolve a couple of those conflicts that are usually in these diagrams. People put an activity maybe halfway between this lane and that lane, or kind of skip a few steps or cut a few corners. So it's not really as explicit as it really has to be if you really want to get all this traceability and transparency that we talk about. And actually, we see lots of comments from people that have gone through this, maybe first thinking, oh, shoot, I need to do my diagram again. But actually, that takes way less time than creating the original diagram, because you've created your process. And what people always say is that this was actually a great exercise, because I knew that this wasn't clear before, and now I had to clarify what I meant. Is it going to be this role or that role? So usually people really like to get this guidance that you get when you kind of move from just plain Visio into a database, or really a relational and validated system like RapidValley, for example. So I don't know whether that is the correct interpretation of the question. Does that answer your question?
And Piotr, as they're giving us feedback on the question, but we have the Visio that we have embedded inside of AX for the modeling of the processes. It's not just like regular Visio, right? We've modified it to be able to take on some characteristics that are specific to value-driven BPM and BPMN specifically. So it's not, you're not just leveraging standard out-of-the-box Visio in there. We've embedded it inside of AX, inside of the application, and we've put some constraints in there to help you stay within the BPMN notation.
Absolutely. Think of it as turning Visio diagrams into actual structured data.
Exactly.
That's basically what we do. We apply very strict validations on what you draw in the Visio diagram, and then we turn your diagram into data that we can manage much more efficiently than simple files and folders. Other questions?
All right. We are at the end of the question queue here. So maybe we can start wrapping up. I want to just mention to everyone in the audience, well, first of all, thank you for attending. Second of all, be on the lookout for a very quick survey you'll see pop up when you close out of today's session. We really appreciate any feedback you can give us and our speakers. So as we start wrapping up here, I just remind you that today's session has been recorded. Lou and Piotr, thank you so much for presenting today.
My pleasure.
All right, and thanks everyone again for attending. This concludes the session. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.